The widowed mafia boss's baby wouldn't stop crying until the shy waitress did the unthinkable. The Gilded Kettle was not a restaurant. It was a vault. In the mist-shrouded city of Rainport, Washington, its windows glowed like old money, and the kitchen lights were sharp enough to cut diamonds. Tonight, those lights were focused on secrets, not soufflés. In the private cellar room, Matteo Morano, head of the Bayside Syndicate, was failing. He was failing not at the negotiation, but at fatherhood. Across the heavy oak table, the longshoreman union reps sat rigid, their polite smiles cracking. The signing party was dead in the water, torpedoed by the only sound in the room, the desperate, piercing wail of an 11-month-old child. Ari Morano, Matteo's son, was screaming. It was a raw, lung-tearing sound that had echoed for 20 solid minutes, turning the most feared man in the city into a picture of helpless frustration. His men lined the walls, statues of tailored wool and steel. They were killers, fixers, and accountants who could make fortunes disappear. Yet they all stared at their polished shoes, terrified to move, terrified to breathe. Silas Crow, Matteo's head of security, stood by the door, his jaw so tight it looked like it might shatter. His hand rested on his hip. Useless. You couldn't shoot a baby's grief. The crying wasn't just loud, it was an unraveling. It tore apart the expensive fabric of intimidation Matteo wore like a second skin. He held Ari against his shoulder, his massive hand spanning the boy's back, patting in a useless, angry rhythm. "Shh, Ari, basta, enough." His voice was gravel, but the baby only arched his back and screamed louder, his small face a mask of purple rage. That was when the door creaked open. It wasn't Silas. It was one of the floor staff, a girl, Wren Halpern. She was the shy one, the waitress who mastered the art of being invisible, her eyes always fixed on the floor, her movements quiet as fog. She was carrying an empty silver tray. She shouldn't have been there. The cellar was off limits. Silas tensed, moving to intercept, but she slipped past him before he could react, her gaze fixed not on the boss, but on the baby. She stopped 5 feet from Matteo. "Give me 90 seconds. Her voice was low, breathless, yet it cut through the din. The men looked up, shocked. Matteo froze. His patting stopped. Ari wailed, oblivious. Wren stepped closer, her eyes finally lifting to meet Matteo's. They were a strange, calm gray. "Give me 90 seconds, she repeated, her voice steadier. "No one talks. No one touches the baby, except me." Matteo stared at her. This mousy girl, who probably made minimum wage plus tips, was giving him orders. But his arms ached, his head was splitting, and the union men were watching. "What?" he growled. Wren held up the silver tray, gripping its edge with white knuckles. "Your gun," she said, nodding at the bulge under his left arm. "Put it on the tray." The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. Silas took a half step forward, his hand now fully on his weapon. "Miss," Silas began, his voice a lethal warning. "He can't hold the baby and the gun if he's tense," Wren said, never taking her eyes off Matteo. "The baby feels it. He feels the metal, the cold, the tension in your muscles. He's screaming because you're screaming. Inside, put it on the tray, please." It was the single most insane request anyone had ever made of him, to disarm him, here, now, in front of everyone. But more unthinkable was the fact that his son was still screaming. Slowly, deliberately, Matteo Morano unholstered his custom 9mm. The click of the safety being released was deafening. He laid the heavy, dark steel onto the gleaming silver. The weapon looked obscene, a stain on the polished surface. "Good," Wren breathed. She took the tray from him with one hand, her other hand reaching out. "Not for the baby. Now give Ari to me, and we're going into the walk-in." Matteo hesitated for a final, agonizing second before transferring the hot, screaming bundle into her waiting arms. Wren didn't coddle Ari. She didn't shush him. She turned. Tray in one hand, baby balanced on her hip, and walked directly to the heavy stainless steel door of the kitchen's walk-in freezer. Mateo, feeling strangely naked without his gun and his son, followed her. She pushed the door open, and a blast of frigid, sterile air hit them. She stepped inside, into the narrow aisle between shelves of prime beef and crates of vegetables. "Turn on the fan," she ordered, nodding to the massive industrial circulation unit in the corner. Mateo hit the switch. A deep, mechanical roar filled the small space, a rattling hum that vibrated in their bones. It was a wall of white noise. Immediately, Aries' cry faltered. Confused by the sudden change in temperature and sound, Ren paid it no mind. She set the tray with the gun on a sack of flour. Then, she shifted Aries so he was facing away from her, his chest against hers. She began to move. One hand splayed across Aries' back. She started to tap. It wasn't a pat, it was a rhythm. A precise, complex beat. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 tap. 5, 7, 5. At the same time, her other hand, the one hidden from Mateo's view, moved near Ari's face. She signed, fast and simple, the American Sign Language for breathe, the sign for safe. Mateo watched, baffled, as his son's cries began to hitch. The rhythm was hypnotic. 575. Her fingers tapped with the steadiness of a metronome. She was syncing his breathing. Then she did one last, strange thing. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a small, foil-wrapped packet of black peppercorns, the kind left on tables for grinders. She tore it open with her teeth and crushed the packet near Ari's nose. A sharp, earthy scent cut through the cold. Ari sneezed, a tiny, wet explosion. And then silence. The fan roared, but the crying had stopped. Ari's body, which had been rigid as a board, went boneless, his head slumped against Ren's shoulder. His breathing was still ragged, but it was breathing, not screaming. His eyes fluttered, then closed. The silence was heavier, more profound than the noise had been. Ren stood there, tapping the 575 rhythm for another full minute, her own breathing deep and even. Mateo leaned against a shelf of frozen fish, the adrenaline draining out of him, leaving him weak. He looked at this strange, quiet girl who had just performed a miracle. "How?" His voice was a rasp. "He was overstimulated," Ren whispered, her eyes on Ari's sleeping face. "Too much noise, too much tension. You just had to break the panic loop, change the temperature, change the sound, give him a rhythm to follow, give him a scent anchor to reset his brain." They stood in the cold roar for another moment. "Thank you." The words felt alien on Mateo's tongue, rusty from disuse. Ren finally looked at him. Her face was pale in the harsh fluorescent light. "You can't pay me enough for this," she said, anticipating his next move. Mateo frowned. "I can pay you anything." "No," she shook her head. "I don't want your money. I want a promise." "A promise? No more scaring people in front of children in this restaurant." Her voice was soft, but the demand was steel. "Whatever you do, whatever that was out there, he can hear it in your voice. He can feel it in your arms. That's why he cries." Mateo Morano, who had built an empire on fear, found himself nodding. When they stepped back out into the kitchen, the staff, who had been huddled by the ovens, scattered like mice. The cellar room was silent. Silas was waiting, his face carved from stone. He saw the sleeping baby in Ren's arms, the disarmed boss behind her, and his expression flickered with sheer disbelief. Ren gently passed the sleeping Ari back to his father. The baby stirred, nuzzled into Mateo's neck, and slept. Just then, the kitchen's back delivery door opened. A young busboy, pale as a ghost, held the door for a delivery man holding a massive, ostentatious wreath of black roses. This just came," the busboy stammered. Silas intercepted it, snatching the small white card from its ribbons. He read it, and his face went hard. He handed it to Mateo. Mateo read the note, his thumb stroking his sleeping son's back. The ink was a stark, elegant script from the Morello crew, his chief rivals. It said, "Babies cry when ships go down." The next morning, the Gilded Kettle's kitchen was a fortress of silent preparation. Wren was wiping down steel counters when they arrived. Not Mateo, but a woman who moved like a panther in a $4,000 suit, flanked by Silas Crow. The woman, Asha Kincaid, placed a leather-bound folder on the counter, next to a stack of proofing bread. Her voice was like expensive whiskey, smooth and dark. "Miss Halpern, I am Mr. Morano's legal counsel. This is a contract for specialized consultation services." Wren wiped her hands on her apron, not looking at Asha, but at the file. "I'm a waitress." "You are, as of 10 minutes ago, a noise and environment consultant for the Morano estate," Asha stated, clicking open a pen. 7 days, flexible hours, which means whenever the child requires you, you will be compensated at a rate of 5 figures for the week. She paused. "You will not ask questions about Mr. Morano's business, his associates, or any conversation you may overhear. You are here for the child. Only the child." Asha Kincaid was what the papers called a shadow lawyer, the one who built the legal walls so high and dark, no one could see the kingdom behind them. Wren looked at Silas, then at the contract. Her gaze was steady. "I have rules." Silas almost scoffed, but Asha raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. "We are listening." "Rule 1, Wren said, her voice quiet but not weak. "No weapons, not on his hip, not in his pocket, not in the room, if Mr. Morano or any of his men, including you." She glanced at Silas. "Are in the same room as Ari. The guns stay outside. He can feel the steel. It's cold." Silas's jaw tightened. "That's not negotiable." "It is for me," Wren countered. "Or you can find another way to make him sleep." Asha Kincaid watched Wren with sharp, appraising eyes, then nodded once. "Acceptable. The immediate vicinity of the child will be a weapons-free zone. What else?" "Rule 2, Wren said, turning her attention back to the counter she was polishing. "I don't like looking at people. It's too much. But I will always look at Ari. When I talk to him, I will look at him. I expect the same from everyone else." She finally looked up, her gaze sliding past Asha's shoulder. "He needs to see faces, not the tops of heads or people looking at phones. When you are with him, you are with him." Asha Kincaid smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. "You'll fit right in. Miss Halpern, sign." Silas was assigned to watch her. It was his job to assess threats, and this small, quiet woman was the biggest anomaly to enter Mateo's orbit in years. He sat in the kitchen's back office, reviewing security feeds. He watched her work. She was never still, but her movements were contained. He saw the habit within the first hour. When the kitchen got loud, when a pot dropped, or the dishwashing machine hissed, her eyes would drop to the floor. He watched her count the black and white hexagonal tiles, her lips moving almost imperceptibly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then she would hum, not a tune, but a single, low note, held until the tension in her shoulders eased. She was constantly, quietly, managing her own anxiety. She was a bundle of exposed nerves, wrapped in a blanket of rigid control. That evening, Mateo found her in the small, dry storage room she had claimed as her own. She was installing a cheap, 3-speed standing fan in the corner. "The fan in the walk-in is too cold," she said, not looking at him. "He needs a baseline, a constant." Mateo leaned against the doorframe, Ari sleeping soundly on his shoulder. The silence in the restaurant felt different. Not tense, but held. "My wife," he said, the words coming out rough. "Alara, she tried everything. Music, toys from Italy. Nothing worked." Wren stopped tinkering with the fan's oscillation switch. "She died," Mateo continued, his voice flat, a simple statement of a fact that had ruined his world. "A car accident 8 months ago." Wren was very still. She turned, her eyes landing on his chin, not his eyes. "An accident." "That's what the papers called it." The coldness in his tone was absolute. Wren's gaze sharpened, focusing on him with a sudden, unnerving intensity. "The bomb," she said. It was not a question. Mateo's blood went cold. He straightened up, his hand instinctively tightening on Ari. "What did you say?" "The noise," Wren whispered, her hand going to her own ear. "You said nothing worked for her. It must have been loud. A car bomb is loud, but they're messy. A pressure plate, a timer." "No." She looked at him, her gray eyes clear and analytical. "You hate noise now. You flinch when a tray drops. He was screaming. You were tense. It was a sound. Who set the sound-activated detonator?" "Mr. Morano." He stared at her. She had read him. She had read the entire and horrific event in the simple tension of his shoulders and his intolerance for his own son's cries. She saw the trigger. Before he could answer, she turned back to the fan. "He needs an amber light bulb, not a white one. It's easier on the eyes. And the kitchen staff needs to stop yelling, 'Order up.' They can use a bell, a low one." She had established what the staff was already calling the calm nest. The fan provided a steady shush. The amber light gave the room a warm, womb-like glow. She had them play the sound of the main kitchen ventilation hoods over a small speaker. Ari loved it. The kitchen itself transformed. When Wren appeared, carrying Ari, a tactical silence fell. Chefs pointed instead of yelling. Waiters used hand signals. It was the most disciplined, efficient, and silent kitchen in Rainport. The underworld noticed. Rumors began to bleed through the city. The Gilded Kettle, once neutral ground, was now the Bayside Syndicate's new control desk. Mateo Morano was running his empire from a restaurant kitchen, and his rivals, the Morello crew, were seen circling Pier 13, a critical shipping lane Mateo controlled. The strangeness peaked on Thursday. 2 men in bland, gray suits that screamed federal walked into the kitchen during the lunch rush. They didn't have a warrant. They had something worse, laminated badges from the Coastal Integrity Bureau, the CIB. Wren was tapping the 575 rhythm on Ari's back while the head chef, Rosa, showed the baby a sprig of rosemary. Silas materialized, blocking the CIB agent's path. "This is a private kitchen." "Routine check," the first agent said, his eyes dead. His partner, a younger man, was already walking past, heading not for the food, not for the books, but for the walk-in freezer. The agent opened the heavy door, shined a high-powered flashlight inside for exactly 10 seconds, and closed it. "We're good here," the first agent said. They turned and left, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. Silas and Mateo met in the office 2 minutes later. "They didn't check anything," Silas reported, his face grim. "They just looked at the room you were in with her." Mateo said nothing. He was watching the feed from the kitchen. Wren was in the calm nest with Ari. She had the baby sitting on the floor, surrounded by sacks of rice. She was holding a small, silver bell, ringing it softly. Ding. Pause. Ding. Ari, who had not smiled since his mother died, watched the bell. His small mouth quirked. He let out a small, gurgling sound. Wren rang it again. Ding. Ari laughed. It was a bright, clean sound. It was the sound of life. It cut through the tension, the fear, the CIB, the Morello threat. Mateo Morano watched the monitor, his chest aching. He realized, with a chilling clarity, that this normal woman, this girl who counted tiles and hummed to herself, was the only person who could command his men without a weapon, and the only one who had been able to command his son's heart. And for the first time since Alara's death, Mateo was terrified. Rainport's nights smelled of salt and diesel. The mist from the Puget Sound turned the city lights into damp watercolors. Lantern Row was the only place that fought back, a vibrant slash of neon, steam from noodle carts, and the smell of fried dough. Wren had insisted Ari needed to experience the world. Mateo, flanked by 2 shadows who were definitely not Silas, had insisted on following. He kept his distance, hands buried deep in the pockets of his cashmere coat. His face was the mask of the boss, unreadable and cold, but his eyes never left them. He watched Ren hold Ari up to see a stall of spinning paper dragons, her voice a low, happy murmur he couldn't hear but could feel. He watched Ari, bundled in a small gray jacket, clap his hands, his eyes wide with wonder. For a man who dealt in shadows. The light around them was almost painful to watch. Their next outing was the strangest date in Rainport history. The contract was ending, and Ren insisted Ari needed a permanent sound solution. This led them to the sterile aisle of an all-night electronics store. "This one has 12 settings," Ren said, holding a sleek white machine, "but the ocean sounds like a broken toilet." Mateo, looking utterly out of place, picked up a different one. "This one is black." "That's not a feature," Ren said, almost smiling. She plugged in her preferred model. A gentle, synthetic rain on canvas sound filled the aisle. It was surprisingly soothing. Ari, who was strapped to Mateo's chest in a carrier Ren had forced him to wear, immediately went limp, his head resting on his father's collarbone. They stood there for a full minute, just listening to the fake rain. The store's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Ren, exhausted from a long day, unconsciously leaned her head against Mateo's shoulder. It was the lightest of touches, but Mateo went rigid. He could feel the warmth of her hair through his suit jacket. He smelled cinnamon and the clean, sharp scent of the restaurant soap. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. Ren didn't seem to notice. She sighed, a sound of pure weariness. "This one is good," she whispered. "This is a safe sound." He kept his voice low, a rumble in his chest that Ari slept against. "How do you know so much about safe sounds?" She didn't move, her head still resting on him. "Because I grew up in a place that used silence as a weapon." Mateo waited. "Blue Orchard," she said, the name tasting like ash. "It was a community up in the Cascades, run by a man named Pastor Keene. He taught that a child's cry was a sin, that any sound not in service to him was vanity." She shivered, though the store was warm. "We were punished with the quiet, days of it. No one spoke to you, you couldn't speak, you just disappeared. I learned to listen to the sounds under the silence, the house settling, the wind, a person's breathing. That's how you knew you were still alive." Mateo found his hand had moved, his fingers resting on the back of Ari's head, protective. He had faced men with guns, men with knives. He couldn't imagine this kind of cold, quiet cruelty. She finally pulled away, her face flushed as she realized what she'd done. He likes the rain." Later, back at the Gilded Kettle. Ari was fussy. The new machine was working, but the baby was fighting sleep. Mateo, his patience frayed by a threatening call from the Morellos, loomed over the high chair. "Ari, sleep." His voice was low, the command that made grown men flinch. Ari naturally began to cry. "You're doing it wrong," Ren said, stepping in. "You're pouring gasoline on the fire. Your voice is too deep. It's a threat frequency." "It's my voice," Mateo growled. "Then change the rhythm." She put her hand on Ari's back. "Not a hard pat, a heartbeat. 3, 2, 1, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, pause, tap. Match his breathing, then slow it down." Mateo watched her, then, awkwardly, he placed his large, scarred hand on his son's back and tried tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, pause, tap. Ari's crying hitched, quieting into a whimper. Mateo tried it again, focusing, his brow furrowed in concentration. 3, 2, 1. Ari's eyes fluttered, and he let out a sleepy sigh. Mateo looked at Ren, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. It was a shocking, unguarded expression. It lit his dark eyes, changing him completely from a boss to a man. He let out a short, surprised laugh. It worked. The sound of it, warm and real, hit Ren harder than a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat, and her heart did a stupid, dangerous flip. That laugh, she thought, could undo a person. The danger came, as it always did, from out of nowhere. They were leaving a pediatric checkup. Silas driving, when a man stepped in front of them on the sidewalk. He wasn't a threat, not in the traditional sense. He was a weasel with a camera. "Mr. Morano, is it true you're shacking up with the help? Who's the kid's new mom?" He lunged, not at Mateo, but at Ren, shoving the camera lens and its blinding flash directly into Ari's face. Ari screamed, a terrified, piercing shriek. The world went red for Mateo. He didn't think. He reacted. He grabbed the man's jacket and the camera, his other hand pulling back to break both. "I'll kill you," he snarled. "No," Ren yelled. She didn't grab him. She didn't plead. She put herself between Mateo and the photographer, her hands up, palms out. She looked directly into Mateo's murderous eyes. "5," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The photographer scrambled away. Mateo was still vibrating with rage, his hands fisted. "Mateo, 4, look at me, breathe out." He touched him. Mateo seethed, his eyes locked on the fleeing man. "I know, 3, he's gone. You're safe. Ari is safe. 2. She was calming him like he was a panicked child. 1, let it go. Your system is flooded, let it go. He stared at her. The fury drained, leaving him cold and shaking. He had almost committed murder in broad daylight. She had stopped him. That night, they fixed the kitchen's main security camera, the one aimed at the calm nest, and wired it to a tablet in Mateo's bedroom. They angled a small desk lamp at the wall, punching tiny holes in a piece of black cardstock to cover it. The camera feed, now in night vision, projected a blurry, moving constellation of light onto the ceiling above Ari's crib, a night star projector. For the first time since Alara died, Mateo Morano slept for 4 straight hours. The peace lasted less than a day. A delivery arrived at the kitchen door. Not black roses this time. A bouquet of delicate, pale blue delphiniums. Silas inspected it for wires before handing Ren the card. Her face went pale. Mateo took the card from her hand. The note was simple, written in a precise, elegant script. "I hear you. Keep singing. Gray Canary." "Who is Gray Canary?" Mateo's voice was flat, all warmth from his laugh erased. "I don't know," Ren whispered, but she was lying, and he knew it. He frowned, crushing the card in his fist. He didn't like it. It was a variable he couldn't control. That night, long after the restaurant was closed and dark, Silas Crow did his nightly sweep. He wore night vision goggles, a ghost in the silent kitchen. He checked the locks, the windows, the pantry. Finally, he moved to the calm nest. He ran his hand over the fan, the light, the new white noise machine. Then he ran his hand under the wooden high chair Ari had used for dinner. His fingers brushed something. It was small, round, and cold. He pulled it off. It was the size of a quarter, held by a sticky adhesive, a listening device, a bug. It had been there all day. It had heard Ren's lies, it had heard Ari's laugh, and it had heard Mateo's rare, unguarded moment of peace. The threat wasn't just outside, it was at the table. The bug sat on the polished surface of Mateo's desk. It was black, round, and obscene in its simplicity. The Gilded Kettle's main office was a soundproofed room of leather and dark wood, a place where deals were signed and lives were broken. Tonight, it felt like a tomb. "Silas found it under the high chair," Mateo said. His voice was a low, cold monotone, the voice he used just before he passed a sentence. He was not a father in this room. He was the boss. It was active for 12 hours. It heard you lie about the flowers. It heard you lie about Gray Canary. Ren stood on the other side of the desk, Ari asleep in a carrier strapped to her chest. She had refused to leave the baby with one of the staff. "Tell me who Gray Canary is," Mateo ordered, "or your 7-day contract ends right now, and you will be escorted from this building." Ren looked at the bug, then at Mateo. Her face was pale, but her eyes were not frightened. They were something else, resigned. She said nothing. She simply unstrapped Ari, walked to the leather sofa in the corner, and laid the sleeping baby down, surrounding him with cushions. Then she walked back, not to the desk, but to her own worn messenger bag. She pulled out a laptop. It was old, covered in stickers of birds. She placed it on Mateo's desk, next to the bug. She opened it, and the screen cast a pale blue light on her face. She typed a password that was more than 30 characters long, her fingers moving in a blur. The screen filled with folders, not pictures, not documents. They were encrypted data packets. The titles were simple. Rainport _CIB _shield _roots. Morello _logistics _pier 13. Audio _payload _evidence. Mateo leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This was not a waitress. "What is this?" he demanded. "This," Wren said, her voice quiet but ringing with a strange authority in the silent room, "is Gray Canary." The bottom dropped out of Mateo's stomach. "You?" "I am Gray Canary," she said, her eyes finally meeting his. They were clear, holding no apology. The betrayal was so sharp, so sudden. It tasted like acid. He felt like a fool. He had brought this spy into his kitchen. He had let her hold his son. He had laughed in front of her. He had leaned on her. "You've been playing me," he snarled, his hand balling into a fist. He wanted to sweep the laptop, the bug, everything from his desk. "You used my son." "No," she said, and her voice was so sharp it cut him off. "I protected your son. And you, by spying on me, by sending yourself flowers." "The flowers were a mistake, a message from a source I can't control," she said, dismissing it. "This isn't about you, Mateo, not all of it." She clicked on a file. An audio waveform appeared. She hit play. It was just static, a hiss. "What is this?" he growled. "It's the recording from a CIB agent's phone," Wren explained. "He thought he was recording a meeting. He accidentally recorded this. It's the unique frequency signature of a sound-activated audio detonator. The same model used to—" She didn't have to finish. "Alara." He stared at the waveform, his blood turning to ice. "The CIB is shielding Morello's roots," Wren said, her voice a relentless, low monotone, like a judge reading a verdict. "Morello pays them in laundered funds. When Alara got too close to their peer operations, they didn't just kill her. They used a CIB-supplied experimental weapon to do it. They used sound, the one thing they knew would create the most terror." Mateo sank into his chair. He'd been hunting for the trigger man. He'd been hunting Morello's soldiers. He'd been hunting in the dark. She had been hunting the king. "How?" he whispered. "How do you know this? How did you get this?" "I told you," Wren said. I listen to the frequencies everyone else misses. I'm not a hacker who breaks down doors. I'm a ghost. I find the open windows. I find the signals that are already there. The CIB is sloppy. They're loud, and they're allied with the men who killed your wife." He felt undone. He had wanted to pull her out of the storm, and he found out she was the storm, a quiet, patient, terrifying storm. The door opened without a knock. Silas entered, his face grim. He saw the laptop, Wren's expression, Mateo's stunned silence, and he hesitated. "Boss," Silas said, "it can't wait. We got a message from Hollis Bram." Mateo looked up, his eyes hard. "Bram, the director of the CIB. He wants coffee," Silas said. "Tomorrow, Warehouse 9. He says he has information on Alara's accident, a gesture of goodwill." "A trap," Mateo said instantly. Bram, the man whose organization had supplied the bomb, wanted to help. It was an execution. "Obviously," Silas agreed. Mateo stood. The betrayal was gone, replaced by the cold, familiar clarity of war. "Good, we'll go. You, me, and a support team. We'll set the trap ourselves." He turned to Wren, his face a mask of command. You're done. Your contract is over. Silas will have 2 men take you to a safe house in the mountains. You will not contact anyone. You will not touch a computer. You are a civilian, and you are out." Wren didn't argue. She didn't protest. She reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a thick, 3-ring binder. It was heavy. She placed it on the desk, a dull thud in the silence. "What is this?" he said, his patience gone. "A survival guide," she said. He opened the first page. It was a laminated sheet. R.I. Morano, a user's manual. He flipped the pages. It was all there. A detailed schedule, not just for food, but for naps, for sensory input, for quiet time. A list of his allergies, a list of his favorite foods, with recipes, a breakdown of the 5-7-5 rhythm and why it worked, a guide to his sign language, breathe, safe, hungry, all done. A list of his favorite toys, and a list of the ones that scared him. He flipped to the last section, contingency plans. It had numbers for doctors. It had bank account information Mateo didn't even know she had access to. And the last page, a handwritten note from her. "If you don't come back..." It wasn't a question. It was a plan. She had prepared for his death. She had ensured his son would be cared for, his routines unbroken, his trauma minimized. It was the single most ruthless and tender thing anyone had ever done for him. He stared at the page, unable to speak. A small noise came from the couch. Ari was awake. He wasn't crying. He was sitting up, rubbing his eyes. He saw his father, then he saw Ren. He reached one small hand out through the gap in the cushions. He looked right at Ren. "Mama," he said. It was a perfect sound, clear, unmistakable. Ren's face crumpled. She looked like she had been struck. Mateo froze, his heart seizing in his chest. He looked at his son, who was still reaching. He looked at Ren, who was standing there, having just handed him a manual for his own death. "He thinks I'm his anchor," Ren whispered, her voice thick. "He's right." She took a shaky breath and looked Mateo in the eye, the strategist returning. "You're going to Warehouse 9. You think Bram is the threat. He's not. The threat is the sound he'll use, the frequency. The weapon, you're going to walk in blind, and he's going to use your own senses against you, just like he did to Alara." She tapped the laptop. "If you want to be safe, if you really want to survive this, keep me with you. I hear the frequencies everyone else misses." Warehouse 9 loomed out of the rainport mist, a corrugated steel box leaking rust. The rain wasn't a downpour, just a persistent, cold drizzle that slicked the asphalt. They were in the kitchen's armored delivery truck, a vehicle Mateo had commissioned after Alara's death. It looked like a bakery van, but its panels were reinforced Kevlar and the tires were run flats. "You and Ari stay in the truck," Mateo ordered. "Silas, you're with me." "No," Ren said from the back. She had Ari strapped to her chest in his carrier. "The frequency. I can hear it already. It's on standby." Mateo paused, listening. He heard nothing but the rain. "What frequency?" "A subwoofer," she said, her voice tight. "It's already running. Below 20 hertz? You can't hear it, but you can feel it. It's making your heart race. It's making you want to fight. They're priming you." A cold dread settled on him. She was right. He was on edge, his blood hot. Before Silas could react, the warehouse doors slid open, not with a roar, but a silent invitation. Hollis Bram was not there. Only a single, overturned office chair. It was a trap. "Go!" Mateo yelled, but it was too late. The smoke canisters hissed, filling the loading bay with a thick, acrid fog, and then the sound hit. It wasn't a sound, it was a presence, a deep, bone-rattling thrum that vibrated the fillings in their teeth. It was the sound of a giant, angry heartbeat. Ari began to scream instantly. Mateo felt a wave of inexplicable, primal terror wash over him. This was the sound, the one she had warned him about. A shot rang out, a sharp crack that cut through the base. Silas grunted, stumbling back. Shoulder just a graze. "Oh, get in the truck," Mateo yelled, shoving Silas toward the cab. He turned to pull Ren, but she was already moving. He yanked open the passenger door, ready to dive into the driver's seat. Ren shoved him hard. "You shoot, I drive." He stared, stunned, as she scrambled behind the wheel, throwing her slight weight into starting the engine. She wasn't the shy waitress. She was a different person. "Get in," she screamed, her voice a raw command. He dove into the passenger seat as bullets sparked off the armored plating. The van roared to life. Wren didn't hesitate. She threw the truck into reverse, smashing into one of Morello's sedans, then wrenched the wheel. "They're blocking the exit," Mateo yelled, firing blind through the smoke. The heavy bass drum was everywhere, disorienting him, making the world feel slow and thick. In the cab, Ari's screams were a high-pitched counterpoint to the low-frequency pulse. "I can't hear him, I can't. The sound is too much." Wren was fighting the wheel, her knuckles white. "They're using it to paralyze us, to make him scream." She slammed on the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt. "What are you doing?" Mateo roared. She ignored him, one hand fumbling in her messenger bag, which was on the floor at her feet. She pulled out a small, metal object, a high-frequency dog whistle. "Cover your ears," she yelled. She jammed the whistle into the truck's internal microphone, the one meant for hands-free calls, which she had already routed to an illegal, amplified external speaker. She blew into it with all the air in her lungs. The sound that erupted was the opposite of the bass. It was a piercing, glass-shattering shriek that lanced through the air. The two frequencies, one impossibly low and one painfully high, clashed. It created a sonic void, a chaotic mess of sound that made the air feel like it was tearing apart. Through the smoke, Mateo saw men drop their guns to clutch their heads. The bass speakers, overloaded, popped with a wet, static thump. The sound was gone. "There!" Wren screamed, pointing to a gap in the fence. "That's a service tunnel. It leads to the waterfront." She stomped on the accelerator. The truck shot forward, crashing through the chain-link fence and plunging into the black, narrow mouth of the tunnel. They rattled through the darkness, the only light from the dashboard. They were safe, but Ari was still screaming, his small body rigid with terror from the noise, the chase. Wren was driving one-handed, her eyes on the dark path. Her other hand was on her own chest, tapping hard, tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, pause, tap. Ari's cries began to hitch. He was trying to match her. He was syncing his breath to her rhythm, even in the dark, even while she was driving a getaway car. Mateo watched, his gun heavy in his lap. It was a miracle. This woman, this quiet, strange woman, was a warrior. She had saved him. She had saved his son. An hour later, the Gilded Kettle was no longer a restaurant. It was a fortress. The main kitchen was a sterile, bright field hospital. Asha Kincaid, her suit jacket gone, her silk sleeves rolled up, was pouring antiseptic onto a steel table. Silas sat on a stool, his face pale, his shirt cut away. "Just stitch it. Asha, no anesthetic." "Don't be a hero," Asha snapped, but she was already threading a needle. In the calm nest, the amber light was on. Wren was pacing. Ari held close to her chest. He was finally quiet. His eyes closed. She was humming, but also playing a sound from her phone. It was the low, hollow sound of wind whistling through a metal grill. It was a harsh, lonely sound, but it was steady. Mateo walked in, his hands still smelling of gunpowder. He felt useless. He had brought the violence. She had brought the peace. "Wren," he said. His voice was rough. She turned. Her eyes were exhausted, dark pools of gray. He reached out, his hand open. He meant to thank her. He meant to ask if she was all right. He didn't know what he meant. He touched her hand, the one that had been tapping her chest, the one that was now supporting Ari's head. A jolt went through him. It was sharp, electric, and absolute. It was the shock of life, of shared terror, of survival. It ran up his arm and settled in his chest. A live wire. He saw her eyes widen, her breath catch. She had felt it too. It was not a touch of comfort. It was a touch of recognition. It lasted only a second. He pulled his hand back as if burned. "The news is on," Asha called out, her voice tight. "You'd better see this." On the small kitchen TV, a CIB spokesman was denying any involvement in the unauthorized operation at Warehouse 9. Then the feed switched. a local news anchor, her face grim. "We are just receiving this leaked video, which appears to have been filmed by a bystander." The screen filled with grainy, nighttime footage. It was from the warehouse, but cleverly edited. It showed Mateo, his face a mask of rage in the smoke. Grabbing Ren's arm, it showed him shoving her into the truck. It looked precisely like an abduction. "Fugitive boss Mateo Morano," the anchor read, "is now wanted for questioning in the armed kidnapping of a local waitress, Ren Halpern, and his own infant son." The public narrative had been set. He was a monster who had stolen his own child. Morello had just declared war, not with guns, but with perception. Mateo watched the screen, his face hardening into granite. He looked at Ari, sleeping peacefully, unaware. He looked at Ren, who was watching him, not the TV. He turned to Silas, who was now bandaged. "Get Asha a new phone. Send a message to every captain, effective immediately." His voice was quiet, but it was the voice of a man signing a new law. "We're establishing a white zone," Mateo said. "No business, no deals, no violence, not within 1,000 feet of a school, a hospital, or a park. Any park. If Morello's men are there, we don't engage. We report. We protect the zone. This city wants me to be a monster, fine, but the monster protects the children." The lie about the kidnapping had poisoned the city's air. Mateo Morano was now a fugitive in his own territory, and his white zone declaration was seen as a desperate stunt by a failing boss. The gilded kettle had become a bunker. Ren was in the kitchen, watching Ari stack 2 wooden blocks. When Silas walked in, and he didn't speak, he just turned on the small television mounted near the spice rack, switching from the looping, slanderous news cycle to a live feed from Pioneer Square. A man was standing on a makeshift wooden stage. His voice was not loud, but the cheap amplifier carried it with a nasal, insinuating power. He was preaching about the sin of the city, the sickness that allowed a brute to steal a child, a wickedness that festered in the shadows. Ren's hand, reaching to steady Ari's blocks, stopped. She went perfectly still. The blood drained from her face. "He calls himself Pastor Keen," Silas said, his voice a low rumble. "Showed up 2 days ago. He's been drawing crowds, talking about the child captive in the den of sin. He's talking about us. He's talking about Ari." Ren didn't hear him. She was hearing another voice, in another place. The smell of cold pine and floor wax, the memory of the quiet, the agonizing, silent punishment for a whispered word. Her breath hitched, her body locked in a flashback so vivid she could feel the cold floorboards beneath her feet. Mateo, entering the kitchen, took in the scene in one sharp glance: the television, the man's face, and Ren's paralyzing terror. He grabbed the remote and hit the mute button. The silence that rushed in was heavy, but it was Ren's whisper that broke it. "He's here." It was not her voice. It was the voice of a terrified, lost girl. "He's a street preacher, an annoyance," Mateo growled. "He's the man who raised me," she said, her voice returning, sharp and brittle. "He's a monster." "He's also," Asha Kincaid said, entering behind Mateo, her eyes fixed on the muted screen, "a business associate of the Morello family." She dropped a surveillance photo onto the steel counter. Pastor Keen, smiling and shaking hands with one of Morello's chief lieutenants. The photo was dated 3 weeks ago. "Morello has been funding his revival tour," Asha explained. Her voice clipped at, "They brought him here. They've been waiting to deploy him. Now we know why." A heavy, unspoken truth settled in the room. This was a pincer movement. The CIB and the media were one front, Keen and the public were the other. "A message came through a back channel," Silas said, addressing Mateo, but his eyes were on Ren. "It's a trap, but it's also an offer. A trade." Mateo's face was stone. "What trade?" "He wants her." Silas nodded at Ren. "Keen wants his lost lamb back. Morello wants the gray canary neutralized. They're offering you a clean slate. You give them Ren, and they pull their markers. The CIB backs off. The media finds the real kidnapper, and you get Pier 13 back. It was a devil's bargain. It was the perfect escape. His men, who'd been growing restless under the financial strain and the public humiliation, knew it. Losing the pier meant losing the winter shipping routes. It meant strangulation. This deal was a release. Matteo could feel the weight of his organization, breathing down his neck, begging him to take it. Wren looked at him, her face white, but her gaze was steady. She was giving him the choice. No, Matteo said. The kitchen staff, who had been holding their breath, let it out. Boss, Silas said, stepping forward, losing the pier. I said no. Matteo cut him off, his voice a blade. We don't trade people. He looked at Wren and his voice softened. Just a fraction. We don't trade family. A mutiny was simmering. He could smell it, but he had made his choice. Wren, who had been trembling, straightened. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. Then I'm not hiding. He's using my past as a weapon. He's using silence to hunt me. So we have to build something stronger than silence. For the next day, they retreated to the calm nest. She was not teaching him to be a father. She was teaching him to be an anchor. Ari sat between them, playing with a silver spoon. This is safe, Wren said. She signed it, tapping her crossed fists over her heart in American Sign Language. It's for when he's scared. You do it. He sees it. He knows you're there. Matteo, his large, scarred hands feeling clumsy and oversized, mirrored the motion. This, she said, tapping her chin with 2 fingers, is watch me. When it's loud, when he's panicking, you get his eyes, you anchor him. Watch me. He practiced, safe, breathe, watch me, and he, a man who commanded with shouts and whispers, was learning a new language, one that didn't need sound to prove its power. While they trained, Asha hunted. I've got it, she announced, walking into the nest, a laptop in her hand. The CIB money. Bram is too smart to take direct payments. It's a charity. The Rainport Youth Swim Initiative. It's a ghost fund. They're washing millions. Proof, Matteo asked. The initiative's main benefactor is the Orichalcum Museum, Asha said, and their annual black tie fundraising gala is in 2 days. Bram will be there. Morello will be there. The entire city's elite will be there. It's their big night to wash their reputations. If there's a ledger, a server, any live proof linking Bram to that fund, it's at that museum. The plan was half-formed when the kitchen phone rang. It was the manager, frantic. Rosa Ibarra, the head chef, the one who had loved Ari like her own, the one who hummed Spanish lullabies while she cooked, hadn't shown up for her shift. She wasn't answering her phone. Before Matteo could dispatch Silas, his own private cell phone rang. It was an unlisted number. He put it on speaker. A good shepherd must retrieve his lost lambs. Mr. Morano. Pastor Keene's voice filled the room, oily and smooth. But sometimes, to catch the lamb, you must first borrow one from the flock. Wren let out a small, strangled cry. Rosa is safe, Keene continued. She's in a quiet place, contemplating her sins, an exchange, the girl for the chef, tonight, at the old docks, just you and her. Matteo hung up. His face was a mask of cold fury. He was a creature of action, and he had been pushed. Silas, he snapped, get the team. We're going dark. We're tearing this city apart until we find her. No, Wren's voice was a command. It stopped him, halfway to the door. He turned, his eyes blazing. He has Rosa. He's a zealot. He will purify her. We don't have time. I know, she said, and her voice was shaking. But it was not from fear. It was from a rage that matched his. I know what he does, and you can't win. You go there with guns, and Rosa dies in the crossfire. You trade me, and he wins. He'll have me, and he'll kill Rosa anyway to tie up the loose end. You can't win his way. Then what? Matteo roared, the desperation cracking his control. Trading people for people only creates new blood, Wren said, her voice dropping, becoming the strategist. He set a trap for tonight, so he'll be busy. He won't hurt Rosa until he knows his trap has failed. He wants me to suffer. That gives us time. She looked at Asha. We don't trade. We don't use violence. We trade power for truth. We go to the gala. We take them all down at once." Asha's eyes widened, then narrowed in calculations. "It's insane." "It's the only way," Wren insisted. "We'll hit them where they're strongest. We'll expose the CIB, Morello, and Keene, all at once, in front of the entire city. We'll save Rosa by taking away the only thing they value their power." The Orichalcum Museum was a shard of glass and light, a monument to Rainport's new, clean money. Inside, an orchestra played music that was designed to be ignored, and the city's elite sipped champagne that cost 4 figures a bottle. It was the perfect place to launder a reputation. Wren was invisible again. The crisp black and white server's uniform was a better disguise than a mask. She carried a tray of empty glasses, her head down, her movements blending with the other staff, but in her ear, hidden by her hair, a small receiver crackled, feeding her the CIB's private security frequency. Across the main atrium, Asha Kincaid was aflame in a sapphire blue gown. She was laughing, her hand resting on the arm of a beaming Hollis Bram. "Hollis, darling," she purred, "the Youth Swim Initiative is inspired. Tell me, how do you manage to keep such a wonderful program so secure? The logistics must be a nightmare." Bram, preening under her attention and the champagne, puffed out his chest. "It's all about access control. Asha. We run a tighter ship than the Navy. Our donor data is in an acoustic vault. State of the art. Can't be cracked." The main event was Mateo. He was late, and he was the story. When he walked in, a hush fell over the gala. The fugitive boss, the alleged kidnapper, was here, in a tuxedo that fit him like armor, and on his hip, he held Ari. The baby wore a tiny, matching black suit. On his wrist, a bright blue HeartLink monitor, a device meant to track a child's heart rate, blinked with a steady green light. It was also a GPS beacon, a bright, noisy, obvious decoy. Mateo ignored the whispers. He ignored the pointing fingers. He began to walk, taking the long, dramatic path across the museum's famous glass sky bridge, which spanned the entire atrium. The media, drawn like sharks, swarmed the base of the bridge, cameras flashing, blinding him. He kept his face calm, serene. He held his son. He was a father in public, in a white zone. He was daring them to call him a monster. The second all eyes were locked on Mateo, Wren moved. She slipped through a service door into the modern patrons gallery. The room was dark, filled with angular sculptures, and in the center, a black cube that hummed, the acoustic vault. Wren set her tray down. From her pocket, she pulled a small audio adapter and a flash drive. She listened. The CIB frequency was calm. "All clear on the sky bridge. Target is stationary." She approached the cube. No keypad, no handle. Just a small, circular audio sensor. She pressed her own small, battery-powered contact microphone to it, listening, a faint, baseline pulse. She didn't try to hack it. She tapped on the vault's metal skin. A precise, quiet rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. Pause. Tap, 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 tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. 5, 5, 3. A high-pitched click echoed in the room. A panel slid open, revealing a simple, shielded USB port. The vault was open. It was a key she had designed herself, a rhythm of safety. She plugged in the drive. Files began to appear on her small wrist-mounted screen. Invoices, transfer schedules, warehouse maps for Pier 13. It was all there. The lost lamb found in the house of sinners. The voice was soft, oily, Pastor Keene. He was standing in the service doorway, his eyes glowing with a raptor's zeal. He had slipped past the kitchen-level security. "God has led me to you. Wren, it's time to come home." Wren's blood went to ice. The old panic, the urge to curl up, to go into the quiet, seized her. But then she looked at the data streaming onto her device. She thought of Rosa. She thought of Ari. She didn't speak. She didn't scream. She looked straight at Keene, then deliberately turned her gaze to the glowing red dot of the security camera in the corner of the ceiling. She raised her hands. Her movements no longer a waitress's, but a communicator's. They were sharp, deliberate, and full of rage. "I do not belong to you." Keen's smile faltered. He didn't understand the language, but he understood the defiance. At that exact moment, Bram's earpiece crackled. "Sir, the asset beacon is—" "Wait, it's a loop. The heartlink is a loop." Bram, mid-laugh with Asha, froze. He looked at Ari, safe in Mateo's arms. He had been played. The beacon was a decoy. They weren't after the child. They were after something else. "Shut it down," he snarled into his wrist, his face turning purple. "Shut down the data wing. Cut the power now." In the gallery, the lights went out. The humming vault went dead. Ren's screen blacked out, the transfer at 95%. She was in total darkness with a monster. But then, a new sound came through the gala's ambient speakers, a faint chirp-trill chirp. It was out of place. It was Silas's sparrow machine. The digital bird song meant to be part of the music was now the only sound. The acoustic vault, programmed to recognize a master audio key, clicked. The power down had failed the lock, but not the trigger. The sparrow's song was the final key. The vault's USB port lit up again, running on its own battery backup, triggered by the sound. Ren, in the dark, jammed the drive back in. She hit enter. The last 5% transferred. She named the file Tidewash. On the sky bridge, Mateo saw the lights flicker. He saw the shift in the crowd, and he saw them, two of Morello's men, who had been posing as guests, detaching from the crowd. They weren't moving toward him. They were moving toward the small, velvet-roped play area where the gala's other children were with their nannies. Leverage. Mateo's first instinct was to kill, to drop Ari and end the threat, but he was in his white zone. He was on camera. He adjusted Ari on his hip and walked, calmly, deliberately, intercepting them. He placed himself between them and the children. The two men stopped, surprised. They looked at Mateo, at the baby, at the cameras. They were trapped. Ari, sensing the spike of adrenaline, the silent, deadly confrontation, began to fuss, his small hands grabbing his father's tuxedo. The Morello men smirked. The boss's kid was cracking. Mateo didn't look at them. He looked at his son. He pulled Ari from his hip, holding him close against his chest. He lowered his head, his lips brushing his son's ear. The cameras zoomed in, expecting a kiss, a word. Mateo did neither, just breathed. A long, slow exhale. 3, 2, 1. He wasn't whispering, but he was transferring his calm. He was tapping the rhythm on Ari's back with his heartbeat. Ari's fussing stopped. His body went from tense to boneless. He let out a soft sigh and rested his head on his father's shoulder, perfectly content. The crowd, watching on the big screens, audibly awed. They didn't see a confrontation. They saw a moment of profound, quiet fatherhood. Mateo had disarmed them all. He held his gaze on the Morello men for one more second, then turned and walked calmly off the bridge. The upload complete. The victory, the night before they went to war. They found a sanctuary of glass. The Gilded Kettle's rooftop greenhouse was a long-forgotten project, a skeleton of steel and glass panels where herbs were meant to grow. Now, it was just a space, empty and quiet, save for the sound of the Rainport storm. The rain fell in steady, rhythmic sheets drumming on the roof, turning the city lights below into a vast, blurred ocean of liquid gold. They stood, not touching, watching the weather. The Tidewash data package was ready, set to release to a dozen international news outlets at 7 in the morning. Below them, Asha and Silas were coordinating the final firewalls. Up here, there was nothing but the sound. "This is a good sound," Mateo said, his voice a low rumble. "The rain." Ren nodded, pulling her arms around herself. "It's a barrier. It's white noise. It's safe." He turned from the glass to look at her. "I'm afraid of silence." The admission hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "I know," she said. "No, you don't." His voice was rough. You You hate silence because of what was done to you. I hate it because of what it means. Before the bomb, the one that killed Ilara, I was on the phone with her. She was in the car. She laughed, and then she stopped to take a breath, or I don't know. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the city but seeing a memory. It was just a pause, maybe 1 second, 2, but it was total, absolute silence. And in that second, I knew something was wrong. Before the noise, before the blast, there was that quiet. Now, when it's too quiet, I'm waiting. I'm back in that second, waiting for the world to end. Ren watched him, her heart aching. He was a man made of iron, and he was confessing the crack that ran through him. She didn't offer words. She offered what she knew. She stepped toward him, closing the space between them. She lifted a hand, not to his face, not to his arm, but laid it flat against his chest, over his heart. He flinched, his body tensing at the unexpected, gentle contact. "You're not there," she whispered. She looked up at him, her gaze unwavering. "That silence is a ghost. It's not real." And then she began to tap. Her fingers, light but sure, drummed the rhythm against his sternum. 5, 7, 5, the rhythm that saved his son. "This is real," she breathed. "The rain on the glass, my hand on your chest, your heart, beating under it. This is the new meaning. We're overwriting the memory. Mateo, we're changing the sound of the silence." He stared down at her, her small hand tapping out a code of life on his body. He could feel his own pulse, strong and steady against her palm, the rain, his heart. It was a new trinity. The air in the greenhouse thickened. It was no longer cold. It was charged, electric, filled with the things they had survived. He looked at her eyes, then her mouth, then back to her eyes. It was a question. He would not take. He would not push. He would not be the monster the world believed him to be. He would only ask. She answered. She rose on her toes, her eyes never leaving his. She was not passive. She was active. She met him. The first kiss was a discovery. It was tentative, warm, and tasted of the salt and rain on her lips. It was a question. Answered. And then it was a release. All the terror of the warehouse, the adrenaline of the gala, the long, lonely nights of single fatherhood, the weight of his entire world, it all broke free. His arm, which had held his son, now wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. It was a drowning. He held her as if she were the last solid thing on earth. Her hands, which had been so clumsy and shy, were suddenly confident. They moved from his chest, up his shoulders, lacing behind his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. His wet overcoat, heavy from the gala, fell from his shoulders to the tiled floor. Forgotten. Her own thin server's jacket, still damp, followed a moment later. This was not a gentle exploration. It was a desperate grounding. His mouth moved from hers, tracing a hot path along her jaw to the pulse that hammered in her throat. He breathed her in. She was soap and cinnamon and the clean scent of the kitchen. She was home. "Ren," he breathed against her skin, a word that was half prayer, half curse. "I'm here," she whispered, her head falling back. "Mateo, with you, I'm not owned. I just feel seen." That word, seen, struck him. It was what she had given his son. It was what she had given him. He pulled back, just enough to see her face. Her eyes were dark, her lips swollen from his. "I will never," he vowed, his voice raw, "bring violence to your body. You have my word, what I am, what I do. It stops. It stops here, with you." He lowered his head to kiss her again, to seal the promise. When a sharp crackle came from the baby monitor on a nearby potting table. A small, gurgling sound. Babada. They both froze. They looked at the monitor, then at each other. And a sound that had not been heard in this greenhouse, perhaps ever, erupted a shared, surprised, genuine laugh. Wren buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking with silent laughter. The boss, he's checking in. He has, Mateo grumbled, but a smile was transforming his face. The worst timing of anyone I've ever known. He took her hand, and they walked to the monitor. On the small, glowing screen, Ari was standing in his crib, holding the rail, babbling happily to the darkness. Mateo reached out and adjusted the blanket in the crib, a needless gesture, before Ari promptly fell backward onto his mattress and went back to sleep. They stood watching him for a long, quiet minute. The fire between them had not been extinguished, but it had banked, turning into a deep, warm coal. He led her to a wooden bench by the glass. The rain had softened. The city was settling. He pulled a dusty canvas tarp from a shelf, shaking it out and wrapping it around them both. They sat in the quiet, a new quiet. After a long time, Mateo reached into the pocket of his trousers. He pulled out a simple, elegant platinum band, Elara's wedding ring. Wren saw it and tensed, pulling back slightly. "Mateo, no, I can't." "I know," he said softly, stopping her panic. It's not for that. It's not a replacement." He reached into the diaper bag that went everywhere they did and pulled out a spare pacifier clip. It was a simple, blue braided ribbon with a plastic clip on one end. Carefully, his large, rough fingers threaded the heavy platinum ring onto the ribbon, where it settled next to a bright red plastic teething star. He held it up, a symbol of his past, a tragedy, now physically tied to the hope and future of his son. He didn't put it on her finger. He just handed her the clip. "Our family is one rhythm," he said, his voice just for her. "This is just a part of the beat, a reminder that you're in it with us." Wren took it. She looked at the ring, then at him. She clipped the ribbon to the strap of her bag, a temporary promise, a symbol of a new, complicated, and utterly real family. It was enough. The Tidewash data was set to auto-release at 7 in the morning. At 6:50, the office at the Gilded Kettle was silent as a tomb, charged with the ozone smell of impending war. Mateo stood by the window. Silas was at the door. Asha monitored a bank of encrypted servers. Wren, a laptop open in front of her, watched the clock. Ari was in the calm nest, fast asleep. At 6:55, the power died. Not a flicker, an absolute sterile death. The servers went silent, the lights went out, the baby monitor on the desk hissed, then went dead. "Silas," Mateo snapped, his hand already on his weapon. "No," Wren said, her head tilted. "Listen." Over the sudden, heavy silence, a new sound bled into the room, a high-frequency hiss. It wasn't the gentle white noise from Aries' machine. This was harsh, industrial, and loud. "It's coming from the nest," Wren whispered, her blood turning to ice. Mateo was first through the door. The calm nest was dark, save for the blue-white light of a powerful tactical flashlight. The crib was empty. A CIB agent in body armor stood by the crib, and beside him, Hollis Bram. He was holding Ari in one arm and a portable, directional sound generator in the other, aimed at the empty crib like a weapon. "A father should really keep a closer watch on his son," Bram sneered, his face a mask of sweat and manic energy. Silas moved, but two more agents materialized from the shadows, guns leveled. "Your package didn't go live. Morano," Bram said, his voice tight. "My people cut the lines. We're in a bit of a stalemate. So you're going to give me the real ledgers. All of them. The ones that burn your entire organization. Not just mine." He saw Wren and smiled, a vicious, ugly expression. He turned the sound generator toward her and flipped a switch. The hiss became a roar, a physical pressure in the room designed to overwhelm the human ear. "And she," he yelled over the din, "won't be able to say a word he can hear." He backed out of the room, his men covering him, the sound generator drowning all other noise, a wall of sonic confusion. They were gone. Mateo's face was a mask of pure, animal terror. "The roof!" he roared, starting for the stairs. "No!" Ren screamed, grabbing his arm. She was pointing at her own ear. "The sound, it's not for a closed space. It's empty. It's designed to bounce off glass, to carry. Oh, he's not on the roof. He's on the sky bridge. He's at the orichalcum." Mateo, his world reduced to this one impossible, terrifying moment, didn't question her. He just ran. They found him on the glass sky bridge, as she had known they would. The museum was dark, closed, a tomb of glass and steel. Bram stood in the center, a silhouette against the pre-dawn light. He held Ari. He was not alone. His CIB agents were in a tense triangle with two of Morello's men, who looked as surprised as anyone. "A fail-safe," Bram cackled, his voice echoing in the huge space. "Morello was my insurance, and now, you're mine, Mateo." "Let him go, Bram," Mateo said, his voice a low growl, his gun in his hand, his eyes locked on his son. "I can't do that," Bram yelled, his voice cracking. "My career is over. You're trying to burn me, so I'll burn you first." He stepped toward the edge, holding Ari out over the 3-story drop to the marble atrium below. "The Morano ledgers, your real ones, Mateo, the unredacted files, or he goes into the CIB's experimental adoption program, a ghost child for a ghost father. You will never see him again. You have 90 seconds to save his life." Mateo looked at Ren. His face was shattered. He would give anything. He would burn the world. He nodded, a single agonized motion. "Give them to him, Ren." Ren was already on her laptop, which she had grabbed in the chaos. Her face was cold, her fingers flying. "He's right, Mateo," she said, her voice like steel. "He needs the real ledgers." "Just do it," Mateo pleaded. "I'm not giving them to him," Ren said. She looked up, her gray eyes meeting Bram's. "I'm giving them to everyone." She hit the enter key. In that second, the Tidewash package went live. Not just the CIB files, but all of it. The complete, unedited, damning ledger of the Morano syndicate, every account, every shell company, every bribe, every last dirty secret that held his empire together. Phones on the bridge began to buzz, one after another. Bram's, Morello's men, a notification, a link. The world now had everything. Morello's man looked at his phone, saw his own name tied to a CIB operation, and realized Bram had just sacrificed him. "You fool," he snarled, turning his gun on Bram. "You burned us all." "He's crying," Bram screamed, a desperate last-ditch wail. Ari, terrified by the shouting, the height, was shrieking. It was the unthinkable moment. Mateo dropped his gun. It clattered, loud and final and nuance on the glass floor. He raised his hands, palms open. He looked past Bram, past the guns, at his terrified, wailing son. He signed, clear, sharp movements in the dim light. "Father is here." Ari's cry hitched. He stopped. His small body shuddering, he was looking. His eyes, full of tears, were searching past the monster holding him, for his father's hands. He looked for Ren. Sirens, not from the street, from inside. Doors at both ends of the sky bridge burst open. Tactical teams, not in blue, but in black. Mo was emblazoned on their vests. "Metropolitan Oversight Office, drop your weapons. CIB is compromised." Ren looked at her watch. 7:05. Her automated email, sent to the internal affairs no one knew existed, had been received. The firefight was over before it began. Morello's men were shot. Bram, seeing it all end, let out a howl of rage and threw Ari, not over the edge, but at it. The baby slid across the glass, which, spider-webbed from 2 bullets, cracked with a deafening groan. A chasm opened in the glass. Ari was sliding, helpless, toward the opening. Mateo didn't think. He leaped. He crossed the 4-foot gap of splintered and collapsing glass, his fingers catching the far edge. He was hanging, over the atrium. But he had Ari, snatching him from the slide, pulling him to his chest. "Mateo," Ren screamed. She was there, She grabbed the back of his jacket, her heels digging in, her slight weight the only anchor. "Silas!" she shrieked. Silas, who had followed them, grabbed her waist, a human chain. They pulled, one agonized, desperate motion. Matteo scrambled back onto the stable glass, shielding Ari with his body, rolling them both away from the edge. He lay there, on the cold, broken glass, breathing, just breathing. He was covered in his son's tears. Sirens wailed, shouts echoed. He saw Bram, on his knees, being cuffed, screaming. He didn't care. He was watching Ren, who was on her knees beside him. Her hand was on his back, shaking, but tapping. 5, 7, 5. They were alive. They were together. His empire was dust. His family was safe. The fall of the Murano Syndicate was not a whisper. It was a detonation that rocked the foundations of Rainport. The Tidewash data package tore the city's corrupt infrastructure apart. In the ensuing quiet, Matteo Murano, stripped of his power, his reputation, and his empire, did not try to rebuild. He accepted the loss. He surrendered the criminal assets, the peers, the shadows, with the small, legitimate fraction of his inheritance. He founded Harbor and Hearth. It was not a syndicate. It was a logistics company, headquartered in a clean, windswept warehouse at the edge of the clean docks. It specialized in rapid response humanitarian aid for coastal storm zones. The trucks were white and blue, and the only business they conducted was moving blankets and medical supplies. Ren did not stay. She built her own sanctuary. 6 months after the night on the Sky Bridge, she opened Moonlit Pages, a small bookstore cafe that smelled of old paper, dark roast coffee and cinnamon. It was warm, and the lighting was amber. In the back, past the history section, was a soundproof door with a small, frosted glass window. It was the quiet nest. Inside, 2 deep rocking chairs, a library of children's books, and a high-end white noise machine waited. She offered free, 30-minute classes on de-escalation and sensory anchoring for new parents. The city slowly began to heal. Asha Kincaid, now the most famous and feared lawyer in Washington, spearheaded the civil and federal suits against the CIB. Rainport was cleaner. Silas, fully recovered, traded his tailored suits for a Harbor and Hearth windbreaker. He was the new director of community security, a title that meant he ensured the aid shipments were secure from pirates and price gougers. The final string from Ren's past was cut when Pastor Keene's empire of silence imploded. Once the Morello money dried up, his own followers, facing financial ruin, turned on him, exposing decades of fraud. Ren was called to testify. She stood in the witness box, her hands resting, still, on the railing. She did not look at him. She did not shake. Her voice was clear and steady as she detailed the psychological tactics, the illegal confinement, the silent, cold terror. When she finished, she stepped down, walked past the press, and never looked back. The door to Blue Orchard was closed forever. Matteo struggled with the new, normal quiet. A man who had commanded fortunes, felt useless. He tried, more than once, to give Ren money. He offered her a check with 6 zeros, a trust fund for her, for Ari. She slid it back across the kitchen table. "Matteo, you still don't get it." Her voice was kind. "What you gave us, what you gave me, when you dropped that gun on the bridge was no more fear." She tapped the check. "This is just paper. The payment was the choice. We're even." He, who had only ever known how to move power, was forced to learn how to move in a different world. He learned to make oatmeal, the way Ari liked it, with mashed banana. He learned to read a storybook aloud, not in a growl, but in a whisper. And every night, without fail, he was the one who sat by the crib. He was the one who tapped the rhythm, 575, against his son's small, warm back. It was a ritual, a prayer. One rainy Tuesday, Matteo walked into Moonlit Pages, the bell over the door tinkling softly. Ari, now a sturdy toddler, was stacking wooden blocks in the nest. He looked up, his face bright. He pushed himself to his feet and toddled, unbalanced but determined, across the floor. He didn't go to Ren, who was at the counter. He went to Matteo, wrapping his arms around his father's leg. He looked over his shoulder at Ren, then back at Matteo, and beamed. "Home," he said. The word was new and perfect. Matteo froze. He looked at Ren over the top of his son's head. The old, cold mask of the boss was gone. In its place was the unguarded, vulnerable face of a man who had chosen and been chosen. They did not rush to an altar. A marriage license seemed too small, too transactional for what they had built. Instead, at the public launch of Harbor and Hearth on the docks, they signed a different contract. In front of Asha, Silas, and the new warehouse crew, they signed a family commitment. It was framed and hung in their new, simple kitchen. It had 3 rules. 1, no violence in front of a child. 2, no silence when the truth needs to be spoken. 3, no power is greater than the rhythm of our son's breathing. The end of one story and the beginning of another came on a dark, clear night. They stood on the deck of the H&H Beacon, the company's first transport ship, on its maiden voyage with a cargo of medical supplies. Ari was asleep in his stroller, bundled against the cool salt spray. Ren stood, tucked under Matteo's arm, her head resting on his shoulder. The low, deep thrum of the ship's engines was a steady, constant presence. Ren, her fingers light, tapped a rhythm on his chest, a haiku in the dark. 5 widowed mafia. 7 crying becomes bright anchor. 5 home is here. Matteo smiled, the real, unguarded smile she had first heard in the electronics store. He covered her hand with his grip sure and warm, the last tight knot of his former life, the power, the fear, the loneliness had been unraveled. He had traded an empire for a family. In the distance, the Rainport lighthouse swept its beam across the dark water, a steady, searching circle. A new life, made of thousands of ordinary, extraordinary days, was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please comment below to connect with us and share your thoughts. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. If you want to support us further, press the hype button to help this story reach more listeners.